Welcome back to Open Bible, Open Life. My name is Spencer. I am here with Pastor Kyle, and we have just launched our series in the book of Colossians called First. And most of our listeners may not know that you actually preached through this book almost 9 years ago. And so what I want to know is how...
Almost exactly 9 years ago.
That's right. How does your life and ministry look different now than it did 9 years ago?
That is such a long answer. My life is completely different in almost every way. And without sounding like a prosperity gospel preacher, I am so grateful for all that God has done in my marriage, in my family, in our church. Yeah, you bring up an interesting story that I don't even know if you know. So basically, we are going to launch, I'm not that I'm the most organized person, but I'm a lot more organized now than I was then. And I remember we were just kind of living Sundays to Sundays. And so it's probably just 4 weeks before we're about to launch. And Dave's like, what book do you want to preach? I'm like, well, Colossians. He's like, why? I'm like, I don't know. It's a short Pauline epistle. And then he's like, what do you want to call it? And this is like the beginning of like, I don't know how to lead a church. I need to figure this out. And we just called, do you remember what it was called?
No.
Okay. It wasn't very.
I was there.
I know you were there. We called it Full and Free, which still, when I look back, I'm like, not a terrible title. Okay. And I literally remember us going, do we need a bumper? Do we not need a bumper? And, and he's telling me, you want a bumper. You want a bumper because you need some time before you walk on stage. But anyway, I remember diving into that book. And honestly, there's no practice for preaching every week until you do it. I mean, I love having you on the teaching team, but that moment, and you're going to teach 4 to 6 times, whatever, times a year. When you step in that, which is what I was doing at FBC Durham, when you step into that, like, I am leading, carrying this series.
Yes.
There's a lot of questions. Like, people ask all the time, like, well, how do you break up a book? And it's like, well, just we do this. This is what I teach, is that there is the Spirit. Have you ever heard me talk about this? There's the Spirit, there's the Scripture, and there's the schedule.
Yes.
Of course, it has to all be yeses. But for me, it's like, man, what is God doing? What am I passionate about? I've got to preach on something that's number one, biblical, but number two, I'm excited about.
Yes.
And so I love just a basic, classic Pauline epistle yearly if we can. It's like, whether I've done 1 Corinthians, I've done 2 Corinthians, I've done a lot of them at this point. So I love that. And then there is the Scripture. It's like, okay, the Colossians is 4 chapters. And then this, hopefully this doesn't sound too wooden. Sometimes we have to go, well, this is the amount of time given the cultural calendar that we have. And so sometimes someone's like, well, why was Colossians, I'm making this up. Why was Philippians 12 weeks instead of 14 weeks? It's like,
this series is going to be 10 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, this series is 10 weeks. Could it have been 12, And what's interesting, and I don't know if we'll get into this, I never know what we're going to talk about. I mean, I have an idea. I know what Colossians is about to an extent, the preeminence of Christ.
Yep.
But to me, it's like, that's one of the things that makes ministry fresh, because so much of what I do is the exact same thing each week. It's like, well, I'm going to study the Bible for several hours every morning in preparation to preach a sermon. The exciting thing is, oh man, I didn't know that was in there, or that's going to be really interesting. I know you have the same feeling. You're texting me, man, I'm in Jonah 4, and here's a great insight on anger. And, and I remember one point, I don't know if you remember saying this to me, you're like, do you feel like, you said something like this to me, do you feel like every time you're preaching on something, you need to be working on it? I'm like, yes.
Absolutely.
The problem is that I'm done preaching on it.
I was preparing for my sermon on anger for Jonah 4. And as I was preparing, I was having to scour my conscience.
I know, dude.
On being quick to be angry with Olivia, with my kids, with whatever.
But then you move on the next week and you're talking about, the workplace.
Yes.
And you're trying to be, so you try to the best you can. You say, follow me as I follow Christ. And, I'd rather be a humble hypocrite, and just say, hey, listen, guys, I'm trying. I'm failing in some of these areas. But yeah, looking forward to Colossians.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. A couple more questions about fall of 2016. So
of 2016,
that's when you preached this for the first time. That was our first series as a church. What has changed about your preaching since the fall of 2016?
That is another great question. I'll say this. When I first got up there, so the first Sunday we had 2 services, was probably, I don't think this is an exaggeration, was maybe the 3rd time in my life I'd done 2 services. I had been kind of an itinerant evangelist on the college campus. You just do 1 service when you do that. It's like, okay, here's this big event I'm going to preach.
Yep.
And then FBC Durham, where I came out of, had 1 service. And then Summit let me preach 1 time at the downtown Durham campus, and that had 2 services. And then I was on I don't know if you know this, I was on the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary pulpit committee, or pulpit list. So I one time got you've never been here. I got a phone call from Homestead, Florida. You know where that is? Dude, that is south of Miami, I think. I flew into Miami and I drove and I preached for this little church. I say little, like 200 person church, but maybe 300. They had 2 services, and I think that was the first time actually that I had ever done 2 services. So the first thing is I've had to get used to doing 2 services then 4 services, then 3 services, then 4 services, and 3 services. Okay.
Yep.
It's interesting, man. I don't know. I define my preaching. I don't know if we've talked about this. Maybe Carrie interviewed me about this one time. I think it took me about 2 or 3 years to begin to find my voice. I don't even want to say 9 years in that I found it.
Sure.
But what has changed? I'm way less dependent on my notes.
I can remember having a conversation with you about a year and a half into your preaching.
Yes.
And I noticed that you were less tied to your notes one Sunday, and I said something to you about it. I was like, hey, I actually found you to be a lot more engaging. And you really lit up when I said it.
Yes.
And I don't know that it was that conversation. It was probably a lot of things. Jordan Peterson's influence. But from that point forward, you started to be less and less tied. And you became more and more engaging.
Yes.
Of course.
Man, this is an interesting conversation. I'm glad you asked the question because, I would say I am way less tied to my notes. That would be one thing. Like if I look back and watch old videos, which we have made very hard to find, like it's, I don't even know exactly when we've taken some of the sermons down. Not that they said anything we don't believe. More just like, hey, we've grown, whatever. We may have another season where we do that. But I think preaching without notes is a big thing. I would say it takes me a lot less time to write my sermons, but they're actually a lot longer. And I'm just even saying what I write. Like I looked back. I should have looked for this one. That'd been fun to look at my first sermon on Colossians. But my guess is, and I wouldn't be far off, 12 to 14 pages would be what it is. Now you're talking usually on average 22 pages.
Oh yeah.
So my sermons used to take me 20 hours to write, and we used to do this thing with our staff, where literally the last thing we would do, it would be Thursday at 4:00 because we'd leave around 5 on Thursday because Friday's our Saturday and Saturday's our Sunday. And we would meet, and I would go over my sermon, and I needed until 4:00 on Thursday. Well, now I preach it, as you know, 11 o'clock on Thursdays. My sermon has to basically be done by lunch on Wednesday. So I write all my sermon Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning. I'm always reading, listening to things in between, and then I'm never ahead. I'm just writing for the next thing. So I think that's it. I would say I'm a lot more casual and conversational.
Yep.
I think preaching, I'm always working, you and I've had this conversation, I'm always working a new muscle. So I'm trying currently to become more of a storyteller because I actually don't, for as long as my sermons are and as fast as I talk, I tell very few stories.
Sure.
I give a lot of categories. I give some stats. I give lots of long-term application. I would say that's another thing is I give a lot more application than I used to give. One of the things I try to tell younger preachers is you usually have to go 2 or 3 times more specific in your application than you think.
Yes.
And that's been something I've grown a lot more in. What would you say because I'm trying to learn. Well, you've been here for nine years. You've told me that you felt like there were certain seasons in which you felt like my preaching went to whatever the next level means.
Yes, that's right. I think that your pacing has become more consistent. I think that in the first year or two, you got a lot of feedback. Oh, Kyle, you were talking so fast. It was so fast.
It still happens occasionally. I get really excited.
Your pacing has gotten more steady, I guess you could say.
Yep.
I think you've tapped into your humor a little bit more.
I'm trying.
You're letting your personality
I'm trying
a little more consistently, which is always very fun. You don't get quite as loud as often.
Yep.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. I know. We talked about that recently. I could have a little bit more of the prophet. You know, John Tyson's word to me was less proverbs, more prophet. And and he felt like, man, I had a phraseology, I had a da-da-da for everything. And that was great. Don't lose that.
Yep.
But what I needed was more of the prophetic word in the moment to the people to repent and believe.
That's good. That's good. Last question about the old days. It'll be quick and then we'll move on. A lot of our church doesn't know about this.
Oh, no.
But for a long time, you had a very consistent and loyal relationship to Brooks Brothers button-ups.
I did.
For the first 3 or 4 years.
I cannot believe you're bringing this
up.
And
it's been long enough now that I can ask about it.
No, you can talk about it, dude.
How did this happen? You went from a Brooks Brothers shirt every Sunday to almost no sign of Brooks Brothers.
It's
Tell
funny.
us about
I
that.
have those shirts somewhere. No, I gave a lot of them away. I have some of those shirts still. So it's so funny. It's such a silly question. I love it. It's interesting. So in Brian Chappell's book, and I'm not saying I follow this.
Sure.
In Brian Chappell's book on preaching, he has a section on dress.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if anyone does this. Do you know what he says about dress?
He says you shouldn't be a distraction.
Yeah, basically dress in a way that you don't dress so terribly that everyone's like, oh goodness, is he, does he have 2 shirts?
And does he say you should be one level higher than the rest of the room will be? So like you should be,
so
if the room is in just t-shirts, maybe you should have on a collared shirt. And if the room is in collared shirts,
interesting.
Maybe you should have a button up.
He may say that. I don't know that. I know it's interesting. Lloyd Jones had a really, as amazing as he was, he had some strange thoughts on preaching. He believed that you should be elevated above the people.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very, the word comes down to you kind of thing.
Yep.
And of course he was very, ministers for a long time, they basically wore black to say they were like the people after the Reformation, but then that created distance. Mm-hmm. So basically, what's funny is I think what happened early on is my dad and my brother, they had Brooks Brothers shirts. They bought me a few for Christmas one year. And they're like, hey, listen, these are amazing. You don't need to take them to the dry cleaners. They don't shrink. They're kind of form-fitting. So, dude, I just, over the years, I had so many, dude. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many I had. I mean, I had a lot. And so I don't know I think what happened, honestly, candidly, kind of embarrassingly, is I lost 25 pounds.
I remember. Yep.
Pretty like, and I've probably put 5 more on, but I'm 20 pounds. It's hard to tell.
Right after COVID?
Yeah. I would say right around 2021, 2022.
Yep.
I got back into running, biking, a little bit of lifting, doing some carnivore, and I lost like all this weight. And I was like, enough. They're like, I need new pants. I need new shirts. I actually had, I won't mention who this is. Should I tell this story? I'm like, no, I don't think I'm going to tell a story, but basically I had a lady critique my dress. Like not appropriately, an older lady. And
Margie. Right.
No. But basically, and so I've tried to dress. I don't know. I'm back into golf, so I'm dressing like I play golf all the time. But it's like takes over your life when you get it back into golf. But I also was really into like fitness, and I still am. So I got into all the athleisure wear. So it's interesting. I have people. I had one lady tell me, "Oh, we brought someone, and he still can't get over. He's never seen a preacher preach in joggers." And I've probably done that 5 times.
Sure.
And when it's jogger, I mean, you're talking about this much of my
your ankles are showing.
I got the higher, whatever.
But you can see them.
There you go. I've never preached in shorts. Don't plan on preaching in shorts. Don't think. You can basically say, I don't want to say never, but I don't see myself. But so what's interesting about that is, even though that was a negative thing, I have actually had, and this was not my plan, I have had multiple people tell me my casual dress, which I've now I've become just a little more formal again, but my t-shirt wearing, sweatshirt wearing, whatever, has really put some of their kids at ease and created kind of a casual culture. So I try not to think, to be completely honest with you, I try not to think about my dress that much, but I have had both people on staff who love me and others at times ask questions, mention things. I'm like, look, guys, I promise I'm not putting a lot of thought into this. I think as we've gone to multi-site, dude, this is such a long conversation. We'll end it here. I have thought, this sounds so silly. I've thought more about layers. If you watch a lot of the guys who are on screens a lot, layers seem to help the eye kind of rest on the screen. So you'll see the Craig Groeschels almost always.
Oh yeah.
A jacket over a shirt, a vest here.
Yes.
There's a dynamic going on.
Yes.
So sometimes it's very, very practical.
Good.
It's a great question. Yeah, I have never had anyone ask me that. There you go.
So we're in a series called First. Colossians, of course, as you know, written by the Apostle Paul, written in prison, written probably 60 AD. And we're calling the series First. And so I thought it would be helpful to just read the verse that inspired that name.
Yes.
This is Colossians 1, the second part of verse 18. It says, He, Jesus, is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. Or some verses will say, or some translations will say, that in everything he might be first.
That's right.
And then what I want to do is I want to read to you a little bit before that, maybe one of the most well-known verses in Colossians, and I would love to hear your thoughts. It's in chapter 1, verse 15, when it says, He, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God. What comes to your mind when you read that verse?
What comes to my mind?
Or I can chat about it for a little
Tell
bit.
me a second.
So well, first of all, there are some similarities to Colossians 1 with John 1. And there's also
in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh.
That's right. And then, it just talks about how, if you want to, I think of how, if you want to know what God is like, you look at Jesus.
Yes, well said.
Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Jesus is fully God, fully man. Or as R.C. Sproul, have you ever heard R.C. Sproul talk about this? He says that he actually thinks that it's more accurate to say that Jesus was truly God and truly man. Because if you say that he's fully God, then you're almost minimizing his humanity. But if you say that Jesus is fully man, you're minimizing his divinity. And so R.C. Sproul says the best way to say it is that Jesus is truly God, truly man.
Only he would take so much time to think about that. That's good. I like it.
It's really interesting.
I like that.
It's one of my favorite clips.
Where my mind went was Hebrews 1. Long, when you asked me, what is this image? So Hebrews 1. Long ago, at many times, and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom he also created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power.
Yes.
So it's like there was a lot of ways God spoke. His final word is his Son himself.
Yes.
Yeah. Powerful.
Yes, that's good. So we're going to be in this series, like I said, for 10 weeks total.
Yes. What do you think about that? Is 10 weeks too long?
I think it's spot on.
Okay.
About one or 2 weeks per chapter, roughly.
That's roughly, in these shorter epistles, that's roughly what we do. And 10 weeks is, we're trying to make a series impactful, but not feel like we are in it forever. One of the reasons I like some of these shorter letters, Colossians, Philippians, even Ephesians, is Galatians, you can get in them and through them. I mean, these letters were meant to be read all at once.
That's right.
You know, sometimes if we go too slow, we lose, what is it? We lose the forest through the trees. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So we're going to cover a lot of different themes in this series. We're going to talk about, the preeminence of Christ. Obviously, Jesus needs to be first in everything. We're going to talk about false teaching. We're going to talk about worship. We're going to talk about forgiveness. What theme in this book are you looking forward to talking about most? And I know you just said that you havenent planned it all out.
Does
anything come to your mind as you're looking forward to this?
It's interesting. So what we did, I'll answer your question by, I've realized I've never just directly answered your questions. Let me answer it and then go back. I think what I'm most excited about is trying to lift up Christ as big as he is. I mean, I've had a few moments in my life. I don't know if you ever, I was big into John Piper. I know you were in your own way too.
Yep.
Being a few years older than you, I was introduced to John Piper my freshman year.
Yes.
And of college. This would be 2003. And I not only listened to all his preaching, I listened to every conference he did. And he would always do the supremacy of Christ. I remember he did a conference called The Supremacy of Christ in the Postmodern World, something like that.
Yes.
And he spent only he could do. He spent 10 minutes lifting up the 10 minutes straight, things like he holds every molecule together, and he just started, he, lifts up kingdoms and tears them down. He just did that for 10 minutes. You're just silent. So I think what I'm excited about is lifting up a massive view of Christ. What's interesting about Colossians is, I've heard it said, and I didn't know this when I preached. I don't think I knew this. I would highly recommend a new pastor preach Colossians or Philippians, probably even Colossians over Philippians. There's almost nothing negative in there. I'm not trying to be soft on people, but I'm saying you're not Galatians 1, who's bewitched you, I'm angry.
That's right.
You're not Ephesians 1, predestination, election right away. Colossians is there's no major rebuke. There's a lot. Basically, Colossians is about the supremacy of Christ. As I understand it so far, I'll understand a lot more in 10 weeks. And I've already preached it, but it was a long time ago.
Yep.
But it's really about the supremacy of Christ. But then it's a lot about, what you'll find a lot is the language of being established, the language of being grounded, the language of being rooted. Exactly.
Yep.
And so, because I don't want to forget this, you may bring this up in a little bit, but I'll bring it up now. Part of what we're trying to do in this unique season, which is an interesting exercise, is trying to take every book and every series and go, what does this have to do with the larger vision of multiplying? And we don't want to try to put square peg in a round hole. But I do think a sub-theme that we're going to try to apply in this series is that you will multiply most what you put first.
Yes.
And you're going to want more of, and you're going to tell more people about, and you're going to try to get more of what you love most.
Yes.
And so it's almost like let's get the Christ supreme. That's what I want. I want Christ high and exalted. So I'm excited about it. Yep. Like I told you, it's interesting week in and week out. I know the text we have for the whole series, every text we have for the series. We had every text for every series for 16 months. But what's interesting is usually what happens is, I think in a book like Colossians, like right now, if I had to look at it, I'd be like, I think Colossians 2 is going to be awesome for people. Like I'll have that thought. I'm like, we're going to get into some rooted, established stuff. But then usually it's not what I think it is. It's the sermon in chapter 3 and 4 on family or something that there's a new angle that Paul didn't get to in Ephesians 6. Because, so much of preaching, this, and teaching the Bible is taking the familiar and making it fresh. I don't know that there's going to be a lot in here that we've not talked about as a church already. Right. But with the unique perspective of Paul's in prison, with the unique perspective of the Colossae church, all that, I'm excited to see where it goes, dude.
Oh, yeah, that's good. You mentioned John Piper and the supremacy of Christ. My favorite John Piper quote is not the God is most glorified in us, we're most satisfied in him, although I do love that quote.
Yeah.
My favorite quote is that he says, he's talking about why we exist, and what he says, you and I exist, you probably heard me say this, we exist to spread a passion for the supremacy of God in all things for the joy of all people.
And
what I think is so interesting about that, is I think that's inspired by this verse. In Colossians 1:16, it says that all things were created through him and for him. Basically, you were created by Jesus and for Jesus.
It's so simple, but so deep.
It's good.
And everything, in its pure form before sin touched it, same exact thing.
Yes.
And that will make you rethink food, and I mean, that's what deep things. I remember Piper said, God created bread so he could talk about the bread of life. Like, what? God created marriage so that you would know a picture of Christ in the church. It's like, he goes, it's not that God looked at marriage and go, great idea. That's exactly like me and my son. Mm-hmm. No, that from the beginning existed to point to Christ. And and people, myself included, where we can have such a domesticated small view of Jesus.
Yep.
The Bible in general, but this book does not let us have that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard probably 10 years ago, I forget what pastor said this, but they were talking about how Christians can enjoy things like food in ways that non-Christians can't.
Yes.
Because when a Christian eats a medium rare steak, for example,
yeah,
it doesn't just stop there. A Christian eats the medium rare steak and thinks, wow, there must be a good God who has allowed me to enjoy such a wonderful thing as this.
Yes.
And it's same with drink, it's same with sex, it's same with marriage, is that these things are meant to point us back to the creator of those things and increase our appreciation for the creator.
Absolutely. Yeah. We as Christians can, no question, go so much deeper and farther in our gratitude than an unbeliever can. We have so much more to be thankful for.
Yep. In Colossians 2, I'm sure you'll probably get into this in the coming weeks, Paul talks a little bit about false teaching. And I looked this up recently. Paul mentions false teachers in 9 of his 13 letters. Why do you think that's the case? Do you feel like addressing false teaching is just as relevant today as it was then? Less?
At least as relevant, probably more. It's hard. You have certain people who, the John MacArthur's, I'm not picking on him. I admire him. Sure. He's been very faithful. He has spent his life in part warning the church of all the false teachers, and maybe in some sense going too far. Mm-hmm. He was a massive critic of Rick Warren years ago just for writing The Purpose-Driven Life. Massive critic. Wow. Massive. He's been very critical of Craig Rochelle. I mean, he's been very critical of the whole Seeker Sensitive movement, like from the pulpit on Sunday as a part of his ministry.
He was critical of Driscoll before it was cool.
Very critical of Driscoll.
Remember?
Yeah, he's always been critical of Joel Osteen. I'm not even saying that all these guys are even the same, and we should be critical.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because I have studied false teaching a lot because I've had to preaching through the epistles. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is Paul, not always, but occasionally calls out the false teachers by name. And so that's always the hardest thing. Is like, is this a false teacher? And is this a false teacher that needs to be called out by name? There was, we can even just think through seasons of the church. There, of course, the classic one is just to say something about the prosperity gospel.
Yep.
But, I just had it. I lost it. There's another thing. And I don't know enough about this. You may know more about this than me, and you could be like, false teaching, not false teaching. I remember there's a whole nother, Tim Challies, who not a false teacher. You know Tim Challies? You don't know Tim Challies? I
know the name,
anyway,
but I'm not familiar with
his work. Time, like when blogging was podcasting before podcasting came out. Like when blogging was at its height, Tim Challies probably had one of the most popular evangelical with a reform-leaning blog in the United States. He's actually from Canada.
Yep.
But he spent multiple blogs, if my memory serves me correctly, calling out the book Jesus Calling. Now, I've never read that book.
Yep.
But that would be like a,
it's a devotional that is written as if Jesus is writing it, but he obviously didn't write it.
He didn't write it. And I don't know how connected and tied it is to scripture, but that would be an example of like somebody who like, I remember him doing it going, okay, for example, here's another thing. I don't know if you know this. Real time here is Kevin DeYoung, who's amazing. You know, Kevin DeYoung wrote a large article to call out Rob Bell when Rob Bell wrote the book Love Wins. Wrote a massive article. I think ended up being on some popular TV show, all that kind of stuff. He just wrote another one. Now, not calling him a false teacher, but he wrote a whole nother one on John Mark Comer.
Practicing the way.
Yes, which a lot of our listeners will love John Mark Comer.
Sure.
I thank God for his, you know, and I think knowing Kevin, I don't know him personally, he was very gracious. I think God sometimes gives certain men some insights to see where this teaching is going, even if I think the most overt false teaching is easy to see. Sometimes it's more the subtle teaching of here's where this type of, you know, I'm making this up. Hey, this guy has a liberation theology to him that you may not sense.
Right.
But let me tell you, liberation theology started with the Catholic Church. And, you know, and you're like, oh, I had no idea. I just thought he was talking about being free in Christ the whole time. And so, I think it's a big deal. I think not to keep repeating and quoting myself, I think in the podcast, YouTube, social media world, there's a lot of false teachers.
Yes.
And then it's a whole nother conversation, which is, do false teachers know they're false teachers? You know, obviously some do.
Sure.
But, and then the last thing I'll say is sometimes you feel, at least I can feel, this is more of a personal thing. If you're calling out some big false teacher, it's almost like a little guy calling out Mike Tyson for a boxing match. It's almost like, check your heart. Sure. Or, you know, like I'm saying this to myself. Why do you feel like you need to use your little ministry to call out some big guy? Is this to draw attention to you? Because the easiest way to become famous is do something well, or make fun of and call out and rebuke people who are trying to do something.
That's right.
And so I'm more hesitant. I can't think of a lot of times where I have called out by name false teachers.
I was just thinking that because you are not someone, I know you well enough to know that you are not afraid to call out false teachers by name.
Yeah.
But when I think about your preaching ministry over the last 8.5 years, I can't recall almost ever you calling out. Let's say it's easy to pick out Joel Osteen. Like he's the most common.
He's the most common. Make fun of him.
As I think about it, you haven't. I don't recall you ever calling him out by name.
I don't think I have.
And it's just because
I haven't felt like. And part of it is like I don't think I feel like that. I don't think Joel Osteen is having a major effect on our church right now.
Right.
You know, the closest thing I've gotten to is to call out like liberal, as Al Mohler would call the project of liberal Protestantism. You know, and so I would sometimes call out like where a denomination is going. I think I feel more okay with like, I'm speaking about a lot of things at once. I'm not narrowing on one person. And then also I think as someone who speaks for a living, I tend to be very gracious to other people who speak for a living.
That's
I'm like, man, I don't know, you know, and I think last thing is a lot of false teachers. I learned this from Andy Davis. It's not necessarily what they're saying. It's what they're failing to say. And it's teaching part of something and not all of something. And again, that takes time. You have to listen to a lot of somebody. Because I think somebody could think I'm teaching part of something, unless, you know, that's what we always kind of say, well, come for 2 or 3 months. And then you'll kind of see a healthy diet of the Word of God.
Yes.
You know, what you heard was a long narrative story on prayer.
Yep.
You need a short epistle on suffering.
Yep.
And together you'll see it all.
Something that's become popular over the last few years is not just calling out false teachers by name, but actually calling out churches that produce worship music. Have you heard about this? So basically, people will get legitimately, and to be charitable toward this view,
I get it.
They're well-meaning. They will basically say that to listen to Bethel music, to listen to Hillsong, to listen to Elevation, could be dangerous because if someone comes to your church and sings those songs, they might be more quick to go to that YouTube page, listen to messages that may not be the most biblically faithful, and it's unwise to sing those songs.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that whole debate?
Well, one, on a personal level at our church, I would say, look, guys, you've got to know Donovan very well.
Yes.
You know, I deeply trust, I know you do too. I deeply trust Donovan. You know, most people, I don't know what they think, but I am not overly, nobody else outside of Donovan. I mean, of course, Pastor Dave a little bit, me a little bit, but Donovan is a godly man who reads his Bible a lot, who is trying to think through, who will text me on a Tuesday, you know, what's the theme this week? How are you ending it? Trying to find the right scripture, the right, you know, scriptural moment, the right songs to sing. And, you know, months ago, we had him on and talked about worship, and it was really, really helpful. But I would just say, one, if I was talking to somebody in our church, I would say, you need to go. I'm not just trying to pass you off. You need to go talk to Donovan before and after service sometime if you don't know him. And you just need to see that this guy is very thoughtful on how he's thinking it. And then I would say, I think I'm able to, in my mind, separate a very well-written song that has biblical truth from a group of persons or churches who err on certain things that we would disagree. This is where, I don't want to become overly puritanical.
Sure.
We've had a situation, a little about this. Every once in a while, we'll bring in a speaker and someone's like, well, do you know that they have women as pastors? It's like, yes, and I did not come have him give the woman pastor talk.
That's right.
He is a, what's Dave's phrase? He's a subject expert.
That's right.
He's a subject expert. Yep. We're having him come in and talk on prayer and fasting and the heart of God, and so, because it's like I couldn't have Tim Keller come in then because we disagree on baptism, and so you're talking about something a little bit different, but I'm talking about the same spirit sometimes. What I saw, you have to understand, this a little bit. I was in such a religious context that I actually loved. And I'm using religious just in the sense of it was wooden. They were gospel people. They love the Lord. But what happens is in those groups of people, not with everybody, you get such a narrow.
Yes.
You can only read Reformation trust books. I mean, yes. There are guys with a straight face who said I wouldn't read anything from Zondervan.
Wow.
We'll read Crossway, but you got to be. I literally had a guy say to me, he was dead serious about this. He goes, "You used to be able to trust InterVarsity Press." And he was like, up until about 1995, everything that IVP put out was good. Now I can't trust it anymore. Yeah. And I appreciate the spiritual discernment, but I think the other thing is there is a spiritual discernment group that I want to stay very, very far away from. Though I believe in spiritual discernment.
That's right, of course.
But I'm like, there are discerning blogs, there are discerning YouTube channels, and none of these people seem happy. And
that's right.
I'm not sure if any of them have a good relationship with their mom and dad. Yeah. I mean, these people are heresy hunters and sin seekers.
That's right.
And I don't want to be that.
That's right. And I think we can both agree that all truth is God's truth.
Yes.
I think that all of us have to acknowledge that we have much to learn from those who are outside of our streams. And this might be naive of me to think, but I think that it is very uncommon for someone to come to our church and sing. I don't even know that we sing elevation songs. We may sing one or two.
Yeah, we have.
But I can't imagine that there's that many people who come to our church, sing a song, and end up going down the rabbit trail of elevation worship and leave our church and go to a church that maybe believe things fairly different than we do.
Yeah. I think, some of this is learned. And there are very godly, humble, great people who ask those questions.
Sure.
But nobody who came to Christ in our church asked that question. Nobody who was baptized in our church asked that question.
That's right.
It's all people who came from different churches with different backgrounds, with a very sophisticated, I want to honor it, sophisticated, slightly nuanced theology about certain issues. What's interesting, I remember early on, Pastor Nate Young was our worship pastor, worship leader, and now he's a pastor in our church. And he's very deep theology. He can go toe to toe with anyone theologically. The deepest. And but I remember he told me that, which is a kind of a classic critique of churches, is that our songs can be too simple and too shallow. I've not heard that in a long time, but like the people who came out of the where is the hymnal? And if it's not hard to sing and doesn't have 6 different stanzas, and if we repeat ourselves at all, this is shallow. And I loved his response. He said, well, go read the book of Revelation, because it says there's angels and day and night, all they sing is holy, holy, holy. So that's about the simplest song
simple
I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I literally had a guy one time, he goes, I don't like going to churches that are 7-11 songs. And I was like, what? He goes, they sing 7 words 11 different times. I'm like, okay, that was clever. That's a clever way to make fun of a church. But so anyway, so we're trying to be gracious. We sing, actually, it's Colossians. We try to sing hymns, songs, and spiritual songs.
That's right. Yep, that's good. Last little section here. Let's talk about the end of Colossians 3. So, the theme of this series is first, and one of the things that we want to put Christ first in is our households.
I see it.
And so we're going to be looking at, it says in Colossians 3:18, it talks about wives submitting to husbands. Husbands, love your wives. Do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents. Fathers, do not provoke your children. How do you feel about preaching these texts? Does it fill you with excitement?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. 2 things to that. Number one, it's interesting that Paul always starts with super deep theology and then gets very, very practical.
Yes.
Almost always. Romans is the deepest theology from 1 to 11, and then 12 to 16 is, 12 to 15 is very practical, and 16 is goodbye. I would say, yeah, I can't think anymore of anything that I get nervous to preach on. That's coming to my mind, genuinely.
Sure.
I would say I do get excited. I think the longer I have lived, the more ministry I have done, the more that I have seen all the teachings of the Bible be true. And so I think in some ways, I feel more confident about talking about male headship or, submission by wives to husbands, loving leadership of home, calling out both, even getting more specific on disciplining your kids. I just think I've seen more life. I've seen more people who thought they were going to do it differently.
Yes.
And, and anyway, and I'm like, and I'm never going to say told you so, but I've seen it not work. And then I've seen some people who were, more, no one's ever been really mean to me or like but I've seen people who have been more critical to me and, or critical to some of the teaching in the past. And as I'm not acting like they finally caught up to me, but as they have studied the scripture more, as they've lived some more life, as they've gotten married, as they've had some kids, as they've worked a job, as they've just, they're like, they see it more.
Yep.
But you're right. There's nothing probably that gets more like sermons or not like sermons than when we get in the nitty gritty of people's home lives.
Yeah. Well, you say all the time that we are called to be distinct and different from the world. And an area that is probably most visible is in the home.
Yes.
And I've heard it said before that someone may view a Christian sexual ethic or a Christian ethic when it comes to the household. In theory, they might hate it. They might talk bad about it. They might be like, the idea of a wife submitting to her husband is just so archaic. They might say that in theory, but if they would come to your house and see how you interact with your wife, see how you serve her, see how you love on your kids, that they would probably apologize and think differently.
I think it was, at least the first person I heard say that, and I've said it based on hearing him say it, is Matt Chandler said, when these things are preached, they're attacked. When they're seen, they're attractive. And I think that's exactly true. When you see a husband love his wife, the wife submit to the husband, the children raised in the fear and admonition of the Lord. I've made the joke, you want to be Harry Potter and you want to build a little door under their stairwell and ask if you can live there. That's how good it is. When it's working well, you're like, there is peace. There is shalom on this home. There is order, and you love it. And so, at the same time, I think what's hard about those passages is we're just modern people with very, very complex lives with ways our parents did it. And then people are like, sometimes like, this is, I don't know, I'll follow where my train of thought's going. This is going to feel completely unconnected for a second, but you'll see how it is. A buddy of mine lived next to two lesbians who were married to each other, so-called married, and they had two adopted kids. And he said, I really want them to come to Christ. But if they come to Christ and start doing what God says to do, it is going to rock their world. And I give that really extreme example. And there are some people who their house life is so dysfunctional.
Yes.
And the way they've set up the economy of the home and the way the wife and the husband are trying to share responsibilities and the goofiness of the things that they're doing with their kids, I'm like, we're about to drop a nuclear bomb. That's what it feels like for these people. It's like they have been living in such absolute, maybe sin, certainly dysfunction for so long that it's going to be very hard. And I try to be as gracious, and that's why I use some humor.
Of course.
It's going to be very hard for them to hear. It's like, what do you do if it's like, it means like you need to get a different job. You need to come home. You need to go to work. I mean, you're messing with people's lives. I mean, God is, I'm saying, but like when you teach truth like that and people have been living in dysfunction, lies, sin, rebellion, folly, ignorance. I mean, those are all different things, but you get what I'm saying? So, but I really enjoy it. I've really seen God work, and the amount of times where people have come up to me and, thanked me for the ministry of our church is more than I can count.
Yeah. Well, you said before that the Bible does a lot of things. It does more than this, but it certainly doesn't do less than this. The Bible comforts, the Bible commends, but the Bible also confronts and it challenges. And I think we're going to see that over the course of these next 9 weeks or so. Last question. So one of the things that I hope that we will see over the next few months is that our church will put Christ first when it comes to their daily rhythms, when it comes to spiritual disciplines. Some of those spiritual disciplines are mentioned in Colossians. It talks about letting the word of Christ dwell within you, So that's reading the word. Talks about worship.
Yes.
Talks about prayer as well. Is there a spiritual discipline that you would love to see our church grow in based off of your interactions with your community group and leaders and things of that nature?
I'm going off of, recently, about a month ago now, you and I were at a staff retreat. And I think I felt most convicted when Dan Ryland, who was the executive pastor at 12 Stone for years, guy probably about 70 years old, one, he talked about his prayer room, which was very convicting.
Mm-hmm.
But two, he just talked about the need for space to think and to pray.
Yes.
And I do think, and what he said, and I'll just end with this, is I do think if scripture memorization is the most rote discipline, like it is just there, you can't fake it in the sense that you're going to show up and if verses are memorized or not, and you put the work in or not, and unless you have a photographic memory, that's it. There's no shortcut.
Yep.
I think that if that's what scripture memory is, I think personal, private, devotional prayer is the hardest thing to fake. Not public prayer, not like, I can fake my Bible reading.
Sure.
To myself. I mean, I can, and I guess I could say my prayers, but I mean, like I can get I've had seasons of that. I've had seasons where I check every box and I'm reading 4 chapters a day and I'm getting through the Bible in a year. I hate to say it, I probably had seasons of that in sermon preparation where it's like, I know how to put this together, but my heart's not as into it as I wish it. But I do think personal, private, what do they say? Secret. Nothing tells you how you're not doing well like secret sin, and nothing tells you that you're doing well like secret prayer.
That's good.
And so I would say that's something that's going to lead into a future series that we're going to do. We're trying to raise the needle in our prayer culture. We did that some with our Expectant series.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everything starts with the word, but I would say personal, private prayer.
Yes.
I'd love to see that grow. Putting Christ first.
That's good. Well, hopefully in the weeks to come, our church will grow in all these areas. Thank you, Pastor Kyle. It's been great chatting about our new series, First in the Book of Colossians. And thank you for joining us. We will see you next time on Open Bible, Open Life.